Let's just get right into it. Shadow of the Colossus changed the way I experience media. I love video games because you are integral to the storytelling experience. The game itself is the director and the writer, but I'm the cameraman, I'm the stuntman, I'm also the protagonist. I always look at a game as a culmination of these things. Did the director give me a beautiful location to shoot as the cameraman? Is there engaging performances from the actors to inspire me as the stuntman? But to reduce it to film terms like this is doing it a disservice because it's more than that. The emotional investment, the challenge of execution, the engagement of the ideas. It's something that a film could never be. Once the film is finished, the story is told. Maybe you'll interpret it differently, but the expression from the movie team is complete. With a game, I might literally have a completely different experience than you. No matter how tight or loose the narrative presentation, the difference in how we all play a game makes for a uniquely personal experience. Shadow of the Colossus barely even has a story, but there are a few characters that I had a stronger sense of connection with than this man and this horse. There are a total of 3 characters who say anything in this game. Your main character, Wander, speaks only 8 lines, all of them in a single conversation, and yet you know exactly his motivation, his loss, his passion, and his pain. Shadow of the Colossus dared to be something that had never been before, and games are better because of it. From the opening cinematic, I knew that I had something special on my hands. Even as a kid, I knew things were different now. This was my own personal experience, but before this, video games were just video games. Diversions that are fun, where I get to test my skills. It's just a thing to pass the time. I had impressive and emotional reactions to games like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, but I was like a 7-year-old or something like that when I played those. A few years later with Ocarina of Time, I was starting to grasp what makes video games special, but I was still too young to really be able to verbalize or understand what I was feeling. I didn't decide that Chrono Trigger was my favorite game of all time until almost a decade later when I returned to it, when I had that perspective and that understanding and that critical analysis. Then I just was blown away. It still holds up to this day. But when I saw the Shadow of the Colossus intro cutscene as a teen, I was transfixed. I didn't have words to express it as a kid, but I was realizing in that moment that video games can be just another medium to tell stories. Now, what you have to understand about the 2000s was that video games were looked down upon. I didn't want to tell kids in school that I liked video games. My parents constantly reinforced in me that video games were a crappy waste of time, and I internalized that and felt bad that I enjoyed them. If you said something like, video games are art, in 2005, people would scoff at you for thinking that. Nowadays, we have untold numbers of creative and evocative and artful games expressing a myriad of ideas. Ori and the Blind Forest, Ghost of Tsushima, Journey, things like Thomas Was Alone. They're more than a sum of their parts. But growing up, there wasn't much to point to make that case, and it made me feel as if my hobby of video games was more egregious and inherently faulty than my peers' hobby of watching TV and movies. So I talked to my friends who also played video games, like my friend Spencer. Yo, Spencer, you're the realest. We would geek out about how stunningly beautiful Shadow of the Colossus was together. He would lend me his copy of Devil May Cry 3, which shaped my love of character action games. I blame you for why I loved God of War Combat so much, Spencer. This is your fault. We would geek out about games in our squad of friends, and I would never mention or even try to think about that when I was with other people. And I'm not talking about having a game addiction like is fairly prevalent today. I'm talking about being a straight A student who also did sports and played video games around these other activities. Even then, I still felt like I was bad and wrong for being a gamer. Beckham, I know you watch these videos. You better be getting straight A's, okay? You can't use this as an excuse. Shadow of the Colossus changed how I looked and felt about video games, and media in general, really. Shadow of the Colossus was as artistic and uplifting and complete as any movie or book I'd ever read or seen. After Shadow of the Colossus, I could say, video games can be art. I'm qualifying here because at the time, we still were absolutely bombarded with crappy licensed games that were atrocious, and those certainly would not fit into the art category. I was now confident that my hobby could be beautiful, touching, awe-inspiring, and thought-provoking. Now this isn't to say there had been no beautiful games before this. This was just the first game that astounded me from start to finish, and had such a holistically expressed vision. It did not care about how video games had been done. It cared about expressing its storytelling vision, and it rejected traditional approaches in its pursuit. It's sometimes easy to forget that video games are a relatively new form of media. The first motion picture was The Horse in Motion in 1878. It's just a motion picture of a man riding a horse. I saw conflicting reports, but a possible example of the world's first video game was a rudimentary Pong-like experience created in 1958 called Tennis for Two. It's kind of amusing that I say Pong-like because Pong didn't come out until the 1970s. Then it wasn't until 1977 that we got the Atari. And this is where the progress on video game ideas and technology really starts to hit the ground running. 1985 we get Super Mario Bros. Then Super Mario World in 1990. 1996 Super Mario 64. Then 1998 Metal Gear Solid. Then 2005 Shadow of the Colossus. The evolution of video games has been explosively rapid, especially when you compare it to things like movies. It's going to be different for everyone, but for a lot of people, myself included, Shadow of the Colossus was a turning point in the history of video games. Then in 2018, Bluepoint Games released the Shadow of the Colossus remake, and it truly is Shadow of the Colossus. It's not Shadow of the Colossus adjacent or similar, it's just Shadow of the Colossus, but with updated technology and expression of the artistic vision. Bluepoint Games are the best! They're just flipping great! They took everything that was great and beautiful about Shadow of the Colossus and used their techniques and artistry to make it even more great and beautiful. I'll be using footage from the remake for most things because it really is that close to the original experience. Let's break down Shadow of the Colossus. You play as Wander, a young man who has lost his love. How do we know it's his love? We don't. But that's kind of the beauty of Shadow of the Colossus. We don't know who this young man is. We don't know his story. But after this intro cutscene and this exchange, we know all we need to know.
Dormi ifo aluyula Oshtu hailwa wuku aikwa Ujisu hiazu tsudoko was nordekyo wutira. It's not ours amuswa. Alu tiklik if the leads to Iso. Uronora. Was no zero. Ola. You do new. No cool.
You spend the rest of the game in absolute solitude amongst this beautiful landscape. This game lives in a space of dramatic dichotomy. It goes from moments of absolute tranquility with your horse, Aro. Aro? Aggro? Spelled aggro, I think it's... but whenever he screams, it sounds like Aro. To adrenaline-pumping moments of praying your grip meter will hold out long enough as you clamber around this jaw-droppingly enormous abomination. These 16 statues are holding the 16 pieces of this being Dorman. Dorman informs you that the statues can be destroyed by killing their respective incarnations that exist in this land. And these 16 colossi are the only enemies in the game. The only things you can even interact with in the entirety of the game are fruit, lizards, save points, Aro, and the Colossi. The world is completely empty except for you, your horse, and your quest. And yet, it is one of the most rich open world experiences I've ever had. The moments in between Colossi battles are peaceful explorations of a beautifully realized world. Then the fights with the Colossi are heart-pounding action spectacles. At the time Shadow of the Colossus came out, I think it was the best animation in video games I had ever seen. The movement of the horse, the physics of Wander getting thrashed around as the Colossi shake. I was absolutely astounded that a PlayStation 2 could even produce something like this. A year after Shadow of the Colossus came out, Twilight Princess was released. Let's directly compare the animation of riding a horse. It was just you and the horse, and that's it. So they spent the time to get the horse right. Aro acts like a horse, screams when hit, stops to drink water, wanders off if you're not paying attention to her. When you call her, she runs from wherever she is located. When you fall too far and get hurt, she comes running to you. It appears like they took this out of the remake, but in the original, the director said that to make her feel more like an actual horse, occasionally she won't respond to commands to speed up or turn, and you have to press the button again to get her to do it. They did everything to make this feel like an actual horse, because it's just you and her in the entire world. They added totally superfluous things to the horse riding, like standing up or hanging off the side. They have horse tricks you can do like quick stops and quick turns. When she gets hit by an attack, she will limp for a bit. The horse feels like a horse, and you start to care about this horse because of it. When Aro's far away, you whistle at her. Why do I keep calling the horse her? Ah, I see. Or do not, rather. Whoa! Whoa! When she's mid-distance, you yell. Aro! When she's close, you speak in speaking tones. Aro! A lot of these things will seem like, yeah, that's just the level of detail you put into games these days. Well, it sure as heck wasn't the level of detail you put into games back in 2005. When you're fighting a Colossus, this is how you address your horse. And this sells the character. Just hearing the stress in his voice as he yells at this horse, and you are sold on the experience. These small things make this game legendary. Tripping over things, stumbling on your back, falling on your face. This is just a man trying to conquer actual giants. The times you fail are as entertaining and intrinsic to the storytelling as the times you overcome and succeed. I can honestly say I had as much fun when things went wrong as when they went without issue, because it all contributes to the storytelling, and the animations of both Wander and the Colossi are wonderful to behold. Each Colossus is some kind of a puzzle. Find its weaknesses with the light of the Holy Sword, and then figure out a way to get to them. All while this giant monster is trying to murder you. The drama of the music highlights the struggle and the tension. Then when you get purchase and things are turning your way, the music changes to victorious and heroic. Everything in this game feels like it was designed to blow me specifically away. It reinforced, and in a lot of ways defined, what I appreciate in media. Music, beautiful cinematic vistas, tight and extremely intricate animations. Now, it didn't have any of that flashy combat that I loved as a kid from character action games like Devil May Cry, or any of that fast and frenetic buttons per second like I loved in shooters like Quake or Half-Life. But what it did and what it expressed, the solitude, the tension, the awe, is all done so well that not for a second did I find myself wishing for those things. No sexualization, no hyperviolence, mostly quiet moments of solitude. Even the way the camera works is focusing and highlighting the landscapes and the vistas. Most of the time your character isn't even in the center of frame. It does these beautifully wide shots as it pulls away from your character, off to the left or the right. The game presents this consistent vision of solitude and solemnity. Even when you defeat a Colossus, you're not met with an exultant fanfare and triumphant victory scene. The thing dies and it plays almost haunting music. Music that is pensive and thoughtful. Then your character absorbs the piece of this dark deity and falls unconscious. Every time you wake up after defeating a Colossus, you're surrounded by more and more of these shadowy onlookers. Then Dorman tells you where to find the next Colossus in the sequence. As you continue to progress, you start to hear her voice softly calling as you come back to consciousness. Then you and Aro head off, once again alone in the world, with nothing but the memory of her voice to spur you on. Then right before the final Colossus, your solitude becomes total and complete, as Aro bucks you off to save you, then falls with the crumbling pieces of the bridge into the abyss. And in this moment, Wander has lost and sacrificed everything for his love. It all culminates with your character being killed by a group of people trying to prevent the resurrection of this dark being. But you've already collected the pieces, and Dorman uses your body to return. The camera pulls back once more, and I could not believe it, but it lets you play this moment out in-game. First angrily thrashing at the men. Then as the Holy Sword is dropped into the pool in the center of the temple, desperately fumbling and stumbling in a futile attempt to escape. You hold on until your grip meter runs out. Or you don't. You could stumble towards your inevitable end if you wanted to. You could leap towards it, embracing it as a just punishment, or a welcome release to the next life. And this is the beauty of the player in the video game story, especially as Shadow of the Colossus presents it. When you kill a Colossus, you could run away from the horrifying, inky tendrils seeking purchase in your chest. You could scream for Aro as you try to get to her. Or you can just sit still and accept them, because this is in fact the reason you're here in this land. To kill these manifestations so Dorman will bring back to life this girl. You could run as an expression of fear, or wait as an expression of resolve. The game uses these moments to tell its story. Here's the thing about your main character in Shadow of the Colossus. He's not a silent protagonist, he just doesn't have a lot to say. Despite him only having 8 lines total, he's not a self-insert. There's a lot of freedom in how you interpret his actions, but he's got clear goals and motivations, and you are assisting in telling his story. Wander is written as a character, and he's voiced by a voice actor, but what is entirely yours is how you experience his story, and with the freedom of interpretation given, how you think his story ends. The bridge leading to this land crumbles to pieces. Then she wakes up and who is there to greet her but a limping and hurt Aro? Here is my final thought. Why is this here? Why is this here? There is no collectible to be picked up, no skill challenge to engage with, no enemy to conquer, no narrative to be fulfilled. There are no colossi in this part of the map. Why is this here? To be seen, to be explored, so that the question can be asked and that the question can be answered. I wonder. Shadow of the Colossus understood that the journey is as important as the destination. This is the path to the 12th Colossus. Though the game holds awe-inspiring loud moments of a man and a colossus, it holds just as much awe in the quiet of a man and a horse. There had never been a game like Shadow of the Colossus, and there probably never will be again.